Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of Advancement Live. My name is Ryan Catherwood, coming to you live from the grounds of the University of Virginia here in Charlottesville, Virginia. Thanks for tuning in today. Advancement Live is part of the HigherEdLive network, which is a series of professional development web shows. We also have podcasts of the show, so after the show has been completed, you can not only watch the video, but you can download the podcast from iTunes. Do be a part of the conversation today with my great guest, Arthur Criscillis of Alexander Haas, and by asking questions using the hashtag HigherEdLive on the back channel. And also be sure to sign up for the HigherEdLive newsletter, which you can do by going to www.higheredlive.com and clicking the link on the right-hand sidebar, and I'll also be tweeting that out momentarily. Now, a word from our sponsors. iModules is the leading constituent engagement management provider for educational institutions. iModules delivers an integrated online platform that transforms how institutions strengthen constituent relationships and achieve fundraising success. HigherEdLive is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing and communications firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. In September, M. Stoner is hosting a complimentary webinar focused on optimizing your design eye. No Photoshop experience is required, and just tweeting out a link to that opportunity to register. It sounds like a great opportunity to learn a little bit more about graphic design. Okay, back to the show. I am very privileged to introduce to you today a fantastic presenter from Alexander Haas, Arthur Criscillis. How are you doing today, Arthur?
I'm doing well, Ryan. How are you doing? Can you hear me?
I'm doing fantastic. Arthur serves as a managing partner at I can hear you okay. Yep, you were just on a little bit of a delay with that first question, but we got you.
Good.
Arthur brings over 25 years of development and nonprofit experience to the firm. Arthur moved from advancement work for colleges and universities into consulting for the opportunity to work with a wide variety of colleges, universities, and independent schools. It's a great pleasure to have him here. I had a chance to watch him deliver a seminar here at the University of Virginia, and it was hugely impactful. Arthur, could you tell a little bit about folks about Alexander Haas?
Sure, happy to do that, Ryan. We are a full-service consulting firm. The bulk of our work comes in either higher education or in cultural organizations. We provide a wide range of services, everything from doing audits of advancement programs, feasibility studies for campaign consulting, general consulting. So we've been in business for over 25 years, based in Atlanta, Georgia, but our United States, although we have a particular focus in sort of the southeastern part of the United States, reaching up into some of the Midwest states.
Fantastic. Yeah, and it was a tremendous webinar. I just had to have Arthur on Advancement Live. To begin with, Arthur, could you talk a little bit about the conversation, have a discussion about why asking for gifts in person is so important?
Well, you know, it really is a matter of effectiveness when you get right down to it. There is no better way, no more effective way to solicit a gift than a personal solicitation. In fact, if we had the resources, by which I mean staff and time and budget, we would solicit virtually every gift every year in person. It gives us the best opportunity to get new gifts, to certainly get upgraded gifts, and when we think about major gifts, planned gifts, clearly those by and large and almost overwhelmingly happen because we have people interacting with people. So in a nutshell, it's important because it is the most effective way to ask for a gift.
Yeah. What are some of the challenges that gift officers face, hurdles that they might have when they begin their work as frontline development officers?
Sure. Well, I think that there is probably a period of adjustment for most people when they begin to get into this work and actually go out and ask people for money. It can be a challenging thing. You may be doing some things that that by instinct you wouldn't do, you're going to ask personal questions. You're going to talk with. And at what point did you lose me?
Why don't we just start from the beginning from challenges one more time?
Sure. Well, I think that clearly it can be a challenge for gift officers when they initially go out to ask for gifts, because you're going to look at somebody in the eye and you're going to ask them to consider making a gift that independently they may not be thinking of making themselves, and you're going to be doing some things that you may have been taught not to do, to talk about money, to ask personal questions, to not take no for an answer. And so in many respects, the worries about what will the response be? Will this person get angry? So there can be any number of reasons to get sweaty palmed. Will I be successful or not? In most instances, we have supervisors that know that we're going to be out there asking for gifts. And what happens if we get a no? What happens if we don't bring back that commitment that everybody's hoping we secure? So I think there can be any number of reasons why, when someone initially goes out to ask for money, they can have some anxiety about it. It's only natural.
How development officers should approach asking for money, because when it gets right down to it, it really is that approach that has so much strategic value to it.
Well, I think a key thing for development officers is how they frame the work up itself. The reality of it is, as we go about our work of dealing with individuals in trying to secure philanthropic support, we can't coerce money from these people. That's not our job, and we're not going to be successful in doing that. We're not going to be able to force them to do something they don't want to do. If we understand that the basic thing that happens when we secure philanthropic support is that we understand what donors value, what's important to them, and we're able to show a real connection between what we're asking them to fund and what they value. So in higher education, we have alumni who very much value what their education has provided to them, and they want to be supportive of the college or the university. They may have had an opportunity to attend college because of a scholarship, and they'd like to pay that back. Make sure that prestige is maintained. They could have particular interests within higher education. And the key to it all is recognizing that, in the end, we do the best work when we understand the donor's motivations, present to them opportunities to further strengthen things that they already value. And so that I think is the key. And if we keep that general approach in mind as we approach our donors and our prospects, we'll be far more successful in securing philanthropic support.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And some of the same themes I've heard and read in the book Donor-Centered Fundraising. What should all development officers be considering now when we're talking about that challenge of making appointments? I think it is one of the prevailing problems, and although I don't make a lot of fundraising appointments myself, I know my colleagues do all the time, and it's hugely challenging.
Sure. Well, of course, the first challenge is just getting a hold of someone.
Right.
And that can be increasingly difficult. But when we get in touch with someone, and there is the opportunity to use email, mail, followed by a call. The phone itself still remains a good tool. But when we get a hold of someone and trying to get that first appointment, I think first we need to understand why are we calling this person? So I'm making an appointment with you. Well, why am I choosing you to call? Is it because you've been a consistent donor? Is it because you've been a successful alum? Is it because you've been involved in some way with the university? And I think it's important before we ever try to reach out to contact someone for an individual appointment to have a pretty good idea of why we are contacting this person from among everyone else. The second thing that I think it's important to know is, in calling that person, what is the nature of this call? You may well have some viewers of this who are going to be asked in their solicitation efforts to secure leadership annual fund gifts, those $1,000, $2,500, $5,000 gifts that we hope to maybe qualify prospects to see if they are interested at all in our university, if we can engage them in confirmation, learn a bit more about them and their interests, and to begin that process of cultivation. And of course, some people do both. So the first thing that we need to know after we know why we're calling this person is, what do I really want to accomplish on this visit? And then the other thing that I think is important to know is to know that the relationship that we build on in making those appointments is the relationship between the individual and the institution. The number of times when whether it's in my talking with gift officers and doing training sessions that I do, or even reflecting on the work that I did when I was an officer, the number of times that I called someone to make an appointment, stuff, that person would say to me, "Now, what's your name again?" They weren't making an appointment with Arthur Criscillis. They were making an appointment with Rhodes College, Center College, Purdue. That's what they really heard. And so I think it's always important to keep that in mind as well. And that really is a fairly comforting thing, isn't it? It's nice to know that we don't carry the weight of the whole thing. So we can depersonalize it. If people decide that they don't want to speak with us, or they don't want the appointment, it wasn't about me, it wasn't about you. It was just about them and the university and where their heads are. So don't personalize it. That's important.
Yeah, and you act as a conduit to the university, as opposed to potentially being turned down personally. I think that makes a lot of sense as well. Is there a difference between getting a first appointment and a second appointment or a third appointment, as far as strategy goes? We got you, Arthur.
Challenging. You got me? Can you hear me?
I got you. Keep going. I think you're on Wi-Fi, so sometimes we're going in and out a little bit on your responses, but you're doing great. Keep going about the difference in getting appointments.
Sure. Well, we wind up with the first appointment being to just a little bit. That's the case. So the first one is easily the most challenging. Usually the second and third after that first one are easy. And in fact, after the first appointment, one of the things that we always want to make sure that we check with that prospect about is to ask them is, can I visit with you again? What's the best way to be in touch? Strategically, when we're going to set that first appointment up, we may have to be ready to help to take their concerns off the table. I mean, let's face it, you're sitting there and someone calls you from your university and wants to visit with you. They're probably worried about at least two things. Number one is you're going to ask them for money. Potentially have to be ready, I think, to take that off the table. Ryan, I'd love to have a chance to visit with you. I'm coming to Charlottesville, and I'd love to have a chance to meet you. I'd love to hear about your days at the university. I'd like to hear about what you've been doing since then. And I might like to talk with you about your annual support this year. Oh, are you going to ask for your money? Well, Ryan may be a particularly good prospect for larger gifts, not just an annual fund gift. And I may say to him, Ryan, I do fundraising. And the reason I want to put that in there is I don't think we ever want to get in the door under false pretenses. We are gift officers. We do development. So, yes, I am a fundraiser, but I'll make you a deal. When I visit with you, I won't ask you for a penny. Unless you bring it up, then all bets are off. How's that? And I'll make a second promise. When I come to ask you for a gift, I'll give you a signal ahead of time so you know it's coming. I think there may be some times that we need to take their concerns off the table, but to not do it in such a way that we're presenting ourselves as something that we're not. We're not friend raisers. We're fundraisers. Do we hope to form friendships? Do we hope to build relationships? Of course we do. But our main purpose is not to be a friend raiser. Our main purpose is to be a fundraiser. So we never want to do or say anything that would position us in such a way that it would appear to that prospect or would remain in our mind that we're somehow not one.
Yeah, I love that we're not going to talk about money unless you bring it up first. I mean, that point really resonated with me when I remember.
Yep. And I think, and we may need to do that, but I would say we should not do that as we're talking with the person initially. So I don't want to say that unless I begin to sense that there is some resistance to making the appointment. Or they raise a concern. Wait, are you,
right,
or do you raise money? Well, you know, I do that. But I tell you what, I really want to meet with you. I want to talk. And so we go right back through and we take the asking off the table. And then we have a chance to meet them and do what we need to do on that first appointment. And if we get the appointment under those circumstances, the most important thing to ask for at the end of that appointment is a second appointment. That is assuming that it was a good and productive one that leads you to believe this is a very good prospect. And so there can be times where we need to do that. Sure.
Yeah, great. And so you've gotten your first appointment, right? They've agreed to meet with you.
Yep.
So what are the objectives of that first meeting?
Well, again, this goes back to what the nature of the meeting is. There are some things that, irrespective of it being a leadership annual giving, I'm going to go ask for the $2,500 or $5,000 or $1,000 gift, versus this is a major gift prospect. But there are some things that we would do irrespective of whether it is one or the other. So, for example, I want to have a good list of questions in my mind that I want to go through with that individual when I meet with her or him. Because the key thing, if indeed donors make gifts based upon their own interests and in light of their own circumstances, then the most important thing that we can do isn't to go in there and to pitch things, to begin to talk, to sell. The most important thing we can do is to ask questions and to learn. And it generally follows the way that I've set that appointment up. And most initial appointments, I do say, I want to meet you. I want to hear about your days at the university. Well, and I think, and what I would say there is it's important to have the list, but the list needs to be in your head and it needs to be organic because you really want it to be a conversation. But I think you want to know things like, you know, if it's an alum, how did you choose the college or university? Did you know what you wanted to major in? How did you decide that? Were there any faculty members that were particularly influential for you, others on campus? What kind of organization, you know, what was your life there like? What kind of things were you engaged in? What do you remember most fondly? When you left, you know, what happened then? They could speak to graduate school. How did you meet your partner, your spouse? Whatever that happens to be. Ask about engagement in the community. What kind of things they're involved in? Because that's important to know, because that tells you a little bit about what they may value by virtue of what they're engaged in their own communities. And so really you want to follow that flow, and when you hear an answer to a question that's interesting, don't be afraid to chase that a little bit and see where it leads. But the big thing is you want to get a picture painted of who that person is. Do they have children? If so, you know, if they're adult children, where they live, what kind of work they have, grandchildren. So get a picture of the person, a flavor, and that then gives you the information that can form the basis of you're beginning to craft some things that might be interesting. You know, when you come to campus, is there a place that you like to go? And why is that? That may tell you of a meaningful thing. What are some of your fondest memories? Or why is that? And they may tell you. So again, I think by asking the questions, the thing that I want to do is I want to try to get a picture of the person's values, the person's interests, the person's connection to the university, to the college, to the program within that. And then I can, from there, begin to make that translation to some of the things that I would like to tell them. And it could be I've got a menu of 10, 12 different things that I could talk about, but I may narrow it down to 3 or 4 based upon what I've heard from them and what may be interesting. So again, a friend of mine once said to me, I never learned a thing with my mouth open. And so I think it's always the annual fund, the asking the questions and talking about some initiatives to indicate that one of the important initiatives that we have at the college, the university, within the program, is to build additional annual support for the unit college. And that could be the transition to then make the ask about increased support. On the other hand, if it's a major gift ask, I've probably set this appointment up for the sole purpose, and I've had several appointments or meetings or engagements with that prospect prior to this ask. But I do think it's always important to be prepared, and that preparation entails, number one, knowing exactly why what you're asking that person to provide financial support for is important, why it matters. In other words, answer the question, so what? Tell me why this matters. Is it need-based scholarship? Well, why does that matter? Not to the university, not to the college, but why it really matters to the students and how it makes a difference, how it can make a difference in making the college stronger and richer and better in the sense of its educational offerings. We have numbers of students who are well suited to our university, but simply based on their own financial circumstances or that of their families, they can't afford to be here. And we do not want to lose those students who are well suited to us to other institutions that may have that need-based aid or maybe not even to higher education. And so we need to have the resources in place to be able to enable them to attend this place when they are well suited to it and want to attend it. We don't want to become just a bastion of the upper class. And so, again, why does that gift matter? Whatever that gift happens to be, whether it's a gift for a piece of equipment or to renovate a classroom or to build a new building, to initiate or strengthen some program, always be ready to answer that question, so what? And that is the case, so that when you present what it is that you're asking them to fund, you can talk about that in a meaningful and cogent way. Ryan, I'd like to ask you to consider making a gift of $5,000 to this year's annual fund, because those gifts into our unrestricted annual fund allow the dean, the president, to do not one specific thing, but a broad variety of things. It gets at the very core of who we are as a college or as a university. You want to have in place, as you think about that ask, is the case for support, why it matters. And sometimes, particularly if it's early on, someone's new with it, they have suggested, and that is say it over and over. Go through the motion saying, I would like to ask you to consider making a gift of $5,000. I'd like to ask you to consider making a gift of $2,500. I'd like to ask you to consider making a gift of $100,000, and to do it often enough so that when you're actually doing it in front of someone, you don't double clutch, you don't stumble, it flows naturally, so that you can just say it.
Fantastic. And I have to imagine that's the most adrenaline-filled moment of the entire meeting, right? Is that moment? How does a development officer get over that adrenaline rush and making the ask?
Well, there are a couple of things that can impact that, but I think I would preface it by saying I'm not sure that you ever fully get over the adrenaline rush. There is always, I think, that sense of, there's a little bit of excitement associated with it, and probably a little bit of anxiety. Will you get the gift? What will the reaction be? You can, using an athletic analogy, you can be an excellent player, football player, basketball player, track, whatever it happens to be, and the likelihood is before the gun goes off for the race or before the kickoff, or before the jump ball, you probably are juiced, and that's probably always going to be the way with any good development officer. If you ever go into an ask and you don't have a little bit of that about you, a little bit of the edge, you might want to think about where you're falling in the spectrum. You don't want it to be so overwhelming, that you get overwhelmed by it, and it really begins to impair your ability to function at a high level. And I think some ways that you can move beyond that is, number one, recognize that you represent an organization that has strength and meaning and does good work, and the response that you get is not a response to you. And number two, recognize that if you've done your work well, even though you may not get a yes, you may be a no that's a true no, that you'll still be able to see and smile at and work with this person. In all likelihood, if they see you at some event on campus, they'll say hi and actually talk with you because you're one of the few people that they know. So, yeah, I don't know that you want to rush. You just don't want it to be paralyzing. That's right, and I think that part of how you can avoid that is recognizing that while and recognize that even the very best development officer is never going to be successful 100% of the time. It's just not going to happen.
Would you, what would you say are, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sure. No, go ahead. That's fine.
I was just going to say, when it comes down to, someone saying no to the question of the ask for the gift, what are some of the most likely reasons for that to happen? Why would someone say no when they've agreed to meet with you?
They're going to have some idea of what it is, but their circumstances can be dynamic and fluid, and they don't know exactly the magnitude or the timeline. So sometimes people can say no because it may be the money. That sounds like, I just don't think I can do that, Ryan. I can't afford $500,000 to fund this program. Well, maybe they could do $250,000, and maybe they could do $100,000. So sometimes when people say no, it's no to the amount. Sometimes it may be to the time. Gosh, Ryan, I just made a major commitment to some other organization, a faith-based group, my temple, my church, whatever that happens to be. Well, do you like the idea of establishing an endowed professorship within the college? And yes, I do. Well, that's a matter of timing. So I think it's always important when someone says in response to our request for a gift, when they say no, it's critical to listen to what they say after that. No is never no until it's qualified. And what they offer to soften that no as to what their concerns are, and sometimes those concerns are addressable. Sometimes it's no to the time, sometimes it's no to the amount, sometimes to the askers, particularly when you're volunteers. Maybe it wasn't the right set of people doing the asking. And sometimes the no really is no. I'm not interested. I appreciate the time, I appreciate that, but I just don't feel like that this is something that I want to make that commitment to. But I think it's, we can hear no, but we can hear it for a lot of different reasons.
One of the most common reasons, Arthur, and a question I just thought up is, my son or daughter didn't get into the university. I'm a loyal alum, I support, I give, or maybe I haven't yet, but this is a reason why I'm no longer going to consider giving a gift. What do you do? What's kind of the response in that sort of a situation?
Sure. Well, there you're dealing with objections. In many instances, if you have something like that, you may well hear that before you ever get to the point of making the ask. That said, you could hear it then. When we think about responses that we get other than a yes or other than a no, then one of the things that we have to do is to make sure that we hear what it is that the person is saying and let them say it and not be quick to respond. Sometimes that response could be along the lines of, I don't think I can give because you're running in the red, or you've eliminated English from your curriculum, something like that that may be factually incorrect. If they offer want to like you factual, if it's factually incorrect, then you can offer them facts in response to it. Here are the requirements for graduation. Here are our audited books. Sometimes it can be a misunderstanding. What they have drawn from things that have happened is a conclusion that's not the only conclusion, and in fact not the best conclusion. In that instance, we probably have to turn to some outside or someone affiliated with us to offer to them do it. And people are upset because the college decided to have co-ed residence halls, and the person believes that that's just going to promote promiscuity. Well, the board had to consider that. The board wrestled with that. So it may well be, if that's the person might be opening to hearing from the board chair or the chair of the student life committee of the board to hear how they came to the decision that ultimately they reached in approving that. So again, I may need to offer somebody else to do that. But sometimes when it's something like, you didn't admit my child, that's a real objection. I hate the president or the dean. That's a real objection. And there is no way to answer those other than to basically, in a nutshell, hear them out, let them express it, and then you can go back and talk about all of the things that have happened that led you to the point of asking them for that gift, and in effect asking them, and then pointing to the fact that this gift is to do something important, and wondering if they might be open to making that commitment in spite of the concern that they have. Ryan, when I met with you, you talked about the value of the education that you received at our place. You talked about how you made lifelong friends. You talked about how you felt connected to the network of alums. And it's unfortunate, I know, that, and I can see and understand from you how difficult it is that your son was not admitted to the university. And I hope that he's doing well. That would be something that when that person says it, you would tell me some more about your son. What has happened? What's he doing? And you may just then have to say, I don't know if it'd be possible, but I hope you might be willing to consider making a gift to the institution and to the university. A lot for you, not that you necessarily owe it because of that, but that's done a lot for you and continues to do the same for the students that are enrolled here. So in effect, what you're trying to say is there any way we could isolate that concern and build on all the other good stuff to have you consider making a gift? So when it's a true objection, that's about the only approach. Is it going to be successful every time? No. Is it going to be successful the majority of the time? Probably it may well be. And so that's the way to handle some of those concerns.
Fantastic. Arthur, we are actually experiencing some technical difficulties. We did catch the entirety of your last answer, which was fantastic, but we did lose your picture, which is okay. So viewers were forced to look at my mugshot, the last question. But well done. And I wanted to thank you very much for your time and energy today, for appearing on Advancement Live. What I will do is when I reproduce the broadcast, I will be sure to edit out some of the technology glitches, and so folks can get a full sense of the show. And so thank you for the folks who did continue to listen to the episode today. And Arthur, thank you so much. I know you've got a busy travel day ahead of you, heading to Tampa tonight. Can you still hear me? Okay. Well, we will leave it there, folks. Thank you very much for staying with me on this edition of Advancement Live. Coming back, Andrew Gosen early next month, and myself, I will be back.
I do. I'm sorry.
Alumni board members and managing alumni board. Sorry, Arthur. Go ahead. We hear you. Oh, and we got your picture. We got your picture back as a finale too.
Ryan, I appreciate
thank you so much.
I apologize for the technology glitches here, but thanks so much. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye now.